I mean, Ashley and I have very different experiences, obviously.
Yeah.
We grew up in different places. I don't know if my like biracialness has, protected me from some of the stuff that she has to think about,
Mm-hmm.
and
Hey,
what?
so I got the video to save. I can edit it and put it up, but we have no context. We just started talking about Ashley's post and didn't explain it. So.
Ah, that's right. All right, Ashley's post. It was her saying something about how she went to the grocery store and somebody wouldn't move out of the way or wouldn't respect her 6-foot bubble, even though she was like obviously trying to avoid them. And then she made a remark about how Asian people need to, I don't know, be more aware of the situation that minorities are in. They're being more affected than white people are by COVID. And so she thought that it was him showing his privilege. That he was just like, oh, whatever, like I'm going to be up in your space.
Is a white
Instead
guy?
of looking out for her. Yeah, a white guy. Instead of looking out for her. And then, of course, someone commented on it, and they were like, you're a racist. You are being everything you say you're against. She was like, does that mean that you hate Jesus too because he was white? Like, what if he'd been that guy next to you in the grocery store? And it was just like, stuff that didn't make any sense and totally denied Ashley's experience. Of course, it was a white woman. And so, yeah, that was where the discussion began because everybody was like, what the fuck? First of all, Jesus wasn't white. And second of all, he would be wearing a mask at the grocery store because who cares? Yes. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was like shocked about that lady, just feeling like the good thing to do in that moment was comment that nonsense on Ashley's post.
So what Ashley was saying really stuck with me because it was something that I didn't ever think of, well, obviously as a white person, but also as just a person who cares about people. I just tried not to be close around people in general, and I'm not, well, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, when I read it too, honestly, it hadn't been something that I thought about either. But I think, Ashley and I have very different experiences, obviously. We grew up in different places. I don't know if my like biracialness has, protected me from some of the stuff that she has to think about.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. So when she said when I first read it, I was like, oh wow, I didn't even think about that either. But it is true. Like if you care about the statistics and like the people who are being affected the most, like, yeah, it would be responsible of you to be extra careful around those. It's just the same way that we're protective around Leif because he's immunocompromised. Like that's a vulnerable population, right? So there's no reason that you shouldn't think about people of color the same way because statistically they're being way more affected by the virus than everyone else.
Yeah.
So I thought that was I could see how it was provocative to that lady, but it's only provocative to people who can't self-reflect. You know what I mean? Where she just immediately felt attacked by it instead of being like, oh yeah, that actually makes sense. Why would we protect Leif any more than any other vulnerable population?
Mm-hmm.
It's just because you don't like hearing that. I don't know.
People don't like to out. Yeah, exactly. It creates an internal challenge. Like the first time I learned it was Orson Welles because I loved his movies, but he was a fucking asshole in real life.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, I can't like his movies then. But then I was like, okay, I guess I can like someone's art, but not agree with them as a person.
Yeah, exactly. Which you
And
totally
it's,
can.
yeah, exactly. It's that kind of internal struggle that, like, I think makes people very uncomfortable.
Hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, isn't that like a huge part of being human is like accepting the things you don't like about people because nobody's perfect. Yeah, but and it's interesting because I think it is really hard for people to stop and think about why something makes them feel attacked, and then like to be able to acknowledge it and let it go. This really takes a lot of like higher thinking, like a higher cognitive power than a lot of people even have access to in their lives. I think about that all the time too. Like
Yes.
we're all struggling, we're all overworked, we're all tired, and how hard is it for us to be like constantly stimulated by all these inflammatory things on Facebook or whatever it is,
Oh my God, right?
and to have them stop and like collect yourself in that way. I understand why it's difficult, but I still thought it was interesting too that she didn't feel the need to respond to what anybody's like, you know, counter arguments to what she was saying.
Yeah, she was like, here's my opinion. I'm going to leave now. Like, you can't
Yeah.
just do that. First of all, you can't just go into this space and deny someone else's experience in the first
Mhm.
place. But then you can't just drop this bullshit and then leave. Like, at least take part in the discussion you just
Yeah,
created.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah, that to me is like that comes from a place of privilege,
it
to be able
really
to
does.
say that and be like, all right, so you can just suck on that. Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to watch the news and worry about it. And she doesn't have to, like, think about that at all. So she just doesn't. That's fucking privileged.
Yeah. She can
Like,
move on from that
yeah.
feeling. Whereas Ashley's gonna be stuck with that because it's part of her everyday life, kind of being denied like that. And I thought it too was interesting that Ashley had to call upon like her white allies or what, I don't know what's the correct word there, but she called on specifically like her friends who are Caucasian to respond to this woman because she already knew that like if another person of color responded that they were going to disregard their opinion as well, because it's like
I didn't
it's
even
like she
notice.
yeah. She had tagged people because Ashley didn't say anything except for like, does anybody else want to respond to
Yeah,
this?
I
Because
saw that. But I
yeah,
didn't look at their pictures that closely. I'm glad that you noticed that. That's interesting.
yeah, I noticed because when they responded, they were all like, somebody made a joke about it, like you're probably only going to take seriously hearing from your fellow Caucasians. So, like, here we are, say something, you know.
I
How I,
like that.
yeah.
Is that what do you think about, like, if I wanted to do that? Is it appropriate to do that, or would I need to wait for Ashley to be like, hey, or whoever to be like, hey, Macy, do you want to comment, or
Well, yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. Like, I wouldn't be offended, but I'm sure somebody could be like, oh, I know you need to feel like you need to come in here and savior me, white savior me, but Ashley specifically like called on them because I think Ashley already has that expectation that like you're already denying what I'm saying, so there's no use in me responding. I might as well like call on somebody who you might take seriously. And in the comments too, two of the people that she had tagged responded to this woman and they were like, hey, like I know what it's like to really struggle with feeling like you're being attacked when somebody talks about how whiteness affects them or privilege and all the other stuff. And it's like, if you really want some sources, like I've been through this as well as like a white person. I've come to terms with all of these things, and I would love to have like if you want to DM me privately, like I would love to discuss this with you. Like, here's some really good Christian sources on dealing with racism as a white person, and I thought that was like a really thoughtful response from somebody who's obviously seeing and like been through that transformation or that realization.
That is fucking amazing. And I didn't realize that there were resources like that until just now. I didn't read all the comments because I was just getting fucking pissed.
It pissed off, yeah. Yeah, no, it helps me to actually read them because, in the end, the people responding were all people sticking up for Ashley, and then like being like, hey, whatever, just if you want somebody to talk to, I would love to help you deal with what you're feeling right now, because I've felt it as well.
It's great that we have that now, and that's what the internet is like now, instead of like, well, we've talked about how when we were introduced to the internet, it was like creepy AIM cyber sex and like commenting on YouTube videos that you should die or something, and now we're like, after our angry years, learning about these things, we can be like, here, let me help you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. It can be hard sometimes. You get overwhelmed with all the negativity, but the internet has allowed us to learn a lot of things we wouldn't normally be able to learn, meet a lot of people we wouldn't normally be able to meet. And we're slowly learning how to deal with those problems, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's going to speed up after Rona, or I hope it will, because even though we've known these things about the disparities in healthcare that Black people or just people of color go through, people haven't been talking about it on a large scale.
Yeah. Well, tell me about the article a little bit, because I haven't finished reading.
It's called Facing Stigma and Discrimination as Both a Racial and Sexual Minority Member of the LGBTQ plus community. So it goes through all of these things that are like, Black women don't get access to mammograms on time. Other things are like food deserts. Is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Food deserts.
Super interesting too. Whenever I lived in Milwaukee and I was pregnant with Life, I volunteered at this. It was like a hydroponics place, and it was a nonprofit. They bought, I think it was just an acre, maybe it was 2 acres in the middle of the city, and an area that was a food desert. They didn't have access to like anything but like gas station food. Basically, the closest grocery store was kind of far away, and it wasn't like a good quality grocery store. And so this nonprofit, I guess, goes to urban areas, and they have these hydroponic farms because you can grow a lot with hydroponics in a small amount of space. And then like people can volunteer there, and then they had like fresh market, like selling their food every weekend. And it was really cool. And it was like mostly people of color like volunteering there because it was the community, and the people like coming and buying the food. I don't know, I loved it. I always thought it would be cool to see more of those, just like how much they can do in this small space. And then like just kind of like the free learning. And also, gardening is just like super meditative anyway. So it was a really happy place to be. It was so nice to see that in the middle of the city where there's just like, where people didn't have access to stuff like that.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that my carrots keep coming back after I move. And whoever lives here next will have carrots. Carrots come back, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think most of the root stuff, like if you leave a a carrot on the ground or something, they'll keep growing. Honestly, now that I'm saying that out loud, I have no idea. But probably.
The cats are fighting. So fucking let me make this about myself for 1 second, just for sake of conversation. Whenever I was reading this article, the part that stood out to me that I'd never really thought about before is she says, I'm going to read this to you, okay? Double minorities experience everyday life stressors and additionally must struggle with societal heterosexist prejudice towards sexual minorities, including differential treatment, derogation, rejection, harassment, victimization, expectations of stigma, anticipation of encountering cisgender heterosexist discrimination, and the vigilance this requires. And that part at the end, and the vigilance this requires, I was like, oh my fucking God, Oprah aha moment, you know? Because Eckhart Tolle was talking about like the pain bodies and stuff, and I was like, holy shit, everybody has this pain body that they carry around with them, and just the expectations of like, okay, I hope this next encounter goes well.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit.
Mm-hmm.
I have that a little bit, but then I was thinking about like the context. Holy fuck.
Yeah. It's like walking into a room, and I always take count of like how many other people are of color in there. Just because. I don't even know why. You know, it's just like a thing that I've been trained to do, and I always feel a little bit more comfortable the more people of color there are, but it's like it just kind of it helps you gauge what your expectations are, because you never know when somebody's going to say something off color to you. Yeah.
What does off color mean?
Like something offensive, slightly offensive, or something that can be taken with offense. Or say something weird. You know, off color is maybe like the softer way of saying something offensive. It's like maybe they wouldn't call it offensive, but it's definitely kind of questionable, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That's a lot of racism, and it's very insipid. I'm glad it has a word. I didn't know that. Insipid, is that the word I'm trying to think of?
I think
insipid or insidious?
Insidious, yes. Because insidious is like sneaky. Yeah.
Off color. I'm really glad it has a word. That's cool. Can I use that?
Yeah. Yeah, it literally means like if something's off color, it means like the color doesn't quite match. It's just slightly off, you know? There's something just slightly off about it. I love you so much.
I love you too so much.
Yeah.
So you have to be vigilant.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of comes natural to you. What happens when you walk into a place and it's like mostly white people? Like what about a party, like a social gathering?
I think it just, what happens then? I mean, most of my life has been like mostly white people when I walk into a room, you know? And so that's why I think it's interesting that I even bother doing the counting, because it basically just helps me gauge like how vigilant I need to be in that moment. And it doesn't always end up meaning anything, right? Like whatever the room is that I'm walking to. But I think having that number in my head reminds me about how vigilant I need to be in that moment or in that situation, you know?
So you mean like how much you should expect an interaction with a white person to go wrong, possibly?
Yeah, or maybe just to like, This is actually interesting for me to have to think about.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I've never really thought about why I do it or what it means when I do it. Because honestly, I don't think it, like, having that number in my head doesn't necessarily reflect how the situation ever ends up going, you know? But I think maybe it affects me more than anything. Like maybe I'm mentally preparing about how I need to act or who I need to be in that moment. Because especially for me personally, like I always tend to kind of adapt to the environment that I'm in. I have like such a wide range of interests, and like I have these two very different families that I come from. And so sometimes I'm like, okay, I can be more this part of me in this group of people. Like when I go to a family reunion on my dad's side, I know there's going to be a lot of dancing. I know that I know what kind of food is going to be there, and I just kind of know like what type of Sarah I'm going to be when I'm there, which is like my more Jamaican kind of expressive self. And then I know what kind of Sarah I'm going to be when I'm at a family reunion for my mom's side of the family, which is like super Mormon or whatever. And it's just like two very different groups that I'm trying to adapt to. And so I feel like I probably take that into a lot of the places I go where I'm like, okay, what's the scene here? Like, which Sarah am I going to be in this situation so that I like ruffle the least amount of feathers or whatever it is, or so that I can fit in the best. You know, so it's probably more a reflection of myself than it is of like what I'm expecting from anybody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like fucking blowing my mind right now. Blowing my mind.
Yeah. A little bit. It's fun and it's confusing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that conflicting or is it kind of like comforting in some situations?
It's both. It's definitely both. Like I really enjoy that I can say I have so many different experiences and like so many different types of people in my life that I feel close to all of them. You know, like my mom's family is pretty freaking. I mean, my dad's family, they're Jamaican and they're Jehovah's Witness, and then my mom's family, like they're from California and with like I don't know French Austrian roots and
Really?
Mormon. Yeah, and it's just like it's very different spending time with one or the other, but I mean, I love them both equally. So, yeah, it's just more to love, but also there's more drama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so weird. I always forget that your mom was Mormon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so weird. What a random combination. And, you know, it's so interesting too, because I always think like people of color weren't even really allowed in the Mormon church till like the 80s or 90s.
Right?
Yeah. So it's just like, I always take for granted what pioneers my parents were. But my dad used to go to church with my mom when we were little. Like that's a big deal when I think about it.
That is.
Yeah, and my dad always cringes. Ryan loves to tell this story that he thinks is hilarious. I've probably told you before. I don't know about how they were at church one day and the guy was doing a sermon on. I think it was like why substances are bad or like drinking and hitting your kids or whatever. And of course, Ryan's like little kid, like 6 or something. And he's thinking to himself, he's like, sometimes my dad drinks. And he's like, and sometimes he spanks us. Like two totally unrelated situations. But in his head, he's like, yeah, my dad spanks me and he drinks alcohol sometimes. And so Ryan like jumps up in the middle of this sermon, you know, in this church that's like,
in Sunday school already like a full-on church.
Yeah, full-on church, like where at a place where my dad already feels kind of out of place. And he's like, sometimes my dad drinks and sometimes he beats me, you know? And everybody's just like, oh, like my dad, I'm pretty sure that was when my dad stopped going to church with my mom. But
I was
like,
going to say that was probably scary for him.
oh yeah, like I don't even, and Ryan is this cute little mixed boy or whatever, or I think it was Ryan, but yeah, I don't know. And so Ryan, we used to think that story was hilarious because it's just like embarrassing and stupid. But when I actually think about how my dad must have felt in that moment, I know why he's just like, every time Ryan tells that story, he's just like, oh my God, kill me. You know? That must have felt so terrible.
Oh, yeah, I'm kind of getting like sympathy hurts, heart hurts, you know? Like
Yeah.
that really embarrassing, like, ugh.
Yeah. It's just really interesting as you get older and you realize all these different things, especially about your parents. And you're like, wow, I've never realized how difficult that must have been. You know, my dad always likes to tell this story too about Reese. One time they went to the movies and Reese like got, I don't know why, he got sick in the middle of the movie and he threw up all over himself and all over my dad. And my dad took him into the bathroom and like took his shirt off and took off Reese's shirt and was like trying to clean him down. And somebody came into the bathroom and my dad, this like black man, is standing in there half naked with this little white boy who's also half naked, you know, and it's just like
What did they do?
I mean, they just gave him a dirty look or whatever, but like, you know, I don't never think about what that must have looked like. My dad adopted. Yeah, adopting two little white kids, and then because my mom got enough comments, I can't even imagine what it was like for my dad to like have the kids out. And people would always ask my mom, she'd be like, "Did you adopt all these kids?" You know, and it's like, no, not the ones you think. Yeah.
That's funny. Not the ones you think.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, that was probably real scary. I wonder if, well, I know that this happens, that like that to other people, cops will stop them and be like, "Is this your dad?"
Mm-hmm.
And like how your parents got stopped, like on a date or something, and he was like, "Ma'am, are you okay?" She's like, "Fucking, well, yeah, I was before I fucking got pulled over with my husband."
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting to stop and think about. You know, and it's like, I understand as I get older why my dad is a little bit paranoid, you know? I was like, oh, my dad's so paranoid because I didn't get it. Like we grew up in a pretty nice little bubble. My parents protected us from a lot of things, and we just thought it was normal because we were so mixed up. I mean, I always told you when I was little, I thought when I grew up I was going to turn into a white lady like Sharona and my mom because I didn't get that, like, I don't know why they were white and why I'm not. I was just like, oh yeah, one day when I hit puberty, I'll just turn into a white like my mom.
How did your child brain put logic to like the fact that other white little girls existed in the world?
I don't think I even thought about it. Like I was just like, I don't know. Just does. I mean, it's just like too when my mom was pregnant with Ryan and she asked Sharona when Sharona was little what she thought Ryan was gonna look like, and she's like, he's gonna be chocolate swirl, you know. Yeah. Half and half. I don't know.
Aww. You know, Ryan was the first one he was really stern with me, actually.
Ryan?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Because
it was whenever we were living together. I can't remember if you were in China at the time. No, I can't remember. But I heard something outside, and so I called the cops because as a white girl, I get rewarded when I call the cops. They're like, it's okay, no worries. You know, if you hear something, like, you call us. It's better to call us than not, whatever. And Ryan got out of the bath or out of the shower, and I thought it was you, or maybe it was Sarah Garrett, whoever else was living there. I was like, oh man, I thought it was Sarah, and I was scared. If I had known it was Ryan, I would have just been like, hey.
I hear weird noises outside. Yeah.
But he was like, Macy, what if that was me? Like, you can't just call the cops like that. Like, I could be out there doing something or smoking a cigarette or whatever, and the cops see me with my hoodie on. Like, you can't do that. And I was like,
And
fuck
I
me.
know
You're
Ryan's
right.
had those experiences before too. So, wow, that's
And so
interesting.
that was really coming from his pain body.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, really, I mean, I was like, damn, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Like, thank you for teaching me that.
Yeah. Oh,
That really was a fucking privilege I had.
I'm so grateful for you though that you're so understanding, because there's so many people that Ryan could have said that to who would have just like blew him off or would have just been like, you're being a baby, like, oh, as long if you're not doing anything wrong, then you don't have any reason to worry, blah, blah, that thing that people are always saying.
Yeah, fuck that. Whatever, I'm fucking 30.
I know. My cataract sunglasses and my booty shorts, yes. This is life.